At this time, I'd like to invite Dr. Jacoby up for his final statement.
Thank you, Kedron. And thank you, Michael, for the very enjoyable interaction this evening, and all of you for being here. I really enjoyed it tremendously. I only wish we had more time, like a few more hours. Despite the entertaining responses and the beginning of 50 independent conversations, all of which could have gone in very fruitful and fun directions, I didn't feel we really dealt with the issue of God's existence. Something midway between his existing and not existing does not seem logically coherent to me any more than, well, you out there in the audience, maybe you exist, maybe you don't. Maybe it's kind of halfway existing and not existing. It doesn't really help. It's true when we're dealing with mysteries. We may not be able to capture everything in words, but obscurantism or playing with grammar and language does not necessarily help. I do want to make one qualification before I say something strong about atheism. Often Christians, very sadly, will quote from the Psalms, Psalm 53 or Psalm 14. The fool says in his heart, there is no God. Therefore, if you don't believe in God, you're a fool. And if you're not sure, you're mentally unstable. This is not a passage really even talking about atheism. The people the Psalms are written for believed in God. In fact, on the average, the ancient Old Covenant people believed in several gods. That's why the prophets kept coming. Their neighbors believed in gods. These are people who thought they could get away with anything in the name of religion, and how wrong they were. By the way, I think that if Jesus came today to the United States, he would be crucified. And I don't think he'd be the atheist doing the crucifixion. I think he'd be crucified as a false Christ, because he shatters the mold and defies the expectation. Having made these possibly charitable concessions to atheism and agnosticism, I think it's undeniable that atheism has been a force for evil when it has become institutionalized. We look at what has happened in China, and North Korea, the Eastern Bloc countries and the old Soviet bloc, and so many other places, the wars that have been caused, the genocides that have been caused. Yes, religious people have done terrible things in the name of God. But when atheism has been institutionalized, many people estimate that in the last century, close to 100 million people lost their lives. That's a mind-boggling figure. I refer now to institutionalized and ideological atheism, not the bland variety of atheism that only minds its own business. Skepticism is good. My faith teaches me, the scriptures teach me to be skeptic. And modest doubt may indeed be the beacon of the wise, Shakespeare, but not immodest doubt. Eventually we have to deal with the evidence from cosmology. Something from nothing? This is not a speculation. This is what nearly every scientist believes today. Something came from nothing. No wonder they resisted it 50 years ago. People don't resist it anymore, but they do sometimes resist the implications. And I'm sad when religious folk resist it. I got an email 2 days ago. I'm a new believer. I told my wife, have nothing to do with science. You can't believe in science and be a Christian. Was I right? Did I do the right thing? I said, no, you did the wrong thing. I know you meant well, but actually it's your friend. It's not your enemy. The universe came into being. Anything that comes into being must be caused. Therefore, the universe is caused. What caused it? Complexity, fine-tuning, whatever the odds are, however many zeros there are. This wasn't going to happen by itself. It wasn't going to lead to human life. It's very suspicious. It looks like it was tinkered with. Not to mention human consciousness, intelligence, even our fixation with meaning. If the world had no meaning, if there were no God, why would we even be aware that we have no meaning? And for these and other reasons, many scientists do believe. In fact, the majority of scientists believe in a spiritual world and a God. 40%, according to the polls, of scientists believe that God answers prayer. They do not draw the conclusion that since the universe is so big, and we've only been here the last microsecond on the scale, that the universe isn't somehow primed for us. That's what's called the anthropic principle. Let's not fall into the fallacy that larger is more important. Than an elephant's more important than a human being. And tall people are more important than short people. We don't settle arguments by measuring our height. Good thing, yes. Let's look at the evidence. I love the quote, God and the astronomers. This is by Jastrow. For the scientist who's lived his life by his faith in the power of reason, the story ends like a bad dream. He has scaled the mountains of ignorance. He's about to conquer the highest peak. And as he pulls himself over the final rock, he's greeted by a band of theologians who've been sitting there for centuries. There is no necessary contradiction between science and faith. These are not non-overlapping magisteria. They are highly overlapping and highly integrated magisteria. If there's a conflict between science and faith, the theology is wrong or the science is wrong. Morality, yeah, there's gray. There are lots of gray in morality, but there's also black and white. And if there's no God outside the system on which to anchor our system of morality and ethics, then who's to even judge a conduct as right or wrong? It does indeed come down to census. And if that's the case, I hope that votes don't determine what's right and wrong. That's a very scary thought. The atheistic worldview may, after all, be a philosophical desire for moral autonomy. I want not to be accountable to an infinite being. And so there may be a strong psychological motive not to believe or commit. For these three major reasons, I believe in a God.
2 minutes.
That's theism. 2 minutes? That's theism. Now, it remains to determine which theism, which kind of theism. Faith is not a flight from reason, but faith is a response to evidence. I believe God exists. Many have been strengthened in their faith, and others have actually been brought to faith from atheism. I've actually studied the Bible with many atheists who've accepted the argumentation and ended up becoming Christians. We know of names like Anthony Flew, Lee Strobel, C.S. Lewis. Why did they cross the floor? Why did they come over? Because of the weight of the evidence. Atheism is inadequate, not just unsatisfying, it's inadequate in dealing with these fundamental questions. Many good points were raised tonight. I don't believe that any insuperable difficulty was presented to faith in God. Probability is on the side of the theists. Probability is far greater that there is a God than not. And my hope is that perhaps you yourself, Michael, will cross the floor one day.
First off, I'd like to thank Dr. Shermer as well as Dr. Jacoby for this debate. I'd like to also thank the Apologetic Research Society as well as IPI Books that are making this recording. I'd like to thank you, everyone who's here, and I hope you guys have a safe drive home. Good night.